Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. It's an island show with a focus on events taking place around the world. And right now we're talking a lot about Canadian politics because it seems like every 5 seconds there's something new. Justin Trudeau announces he's not going to run again as Prime Minister, but he's still Prime Minister. He's hanging on. There's an ad hoc leadership race that just keeps getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And of course, looking over all of this, we have the amazing Donald Trump, who scares the bejesus out of every Canadian. But let's start with what's happened with one less candidate in the Liberal leadership race. Christy Clark. Christy Clark was going to run. She gets in and she says, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. She gets invited by CBC to come on and talk about her candidacy, and they drop a bomb by saying, Christy, didn't you belong to the Conservative Party for a little while? And she tried to avert that question.
Never. But you voted in the race, did you not?
No, I didn't. And I never got a membership, and I never got a ballot. What I did, though,
I would say, Christy Clark, we reached out to the Conservative Party, who told us, in fact, that your membership was canceled.
Oh, well, why don't they come out and show my membership or my ballot? They never sent me any of those, although I wouldn't put it past them to manufacture one of them.
I'll tell you, Robin, what's startling about this is that Christy Clark is actually a very accomplished politician. She was premier in British Columbia for a number of years and did a great job and was voted out, as all politicians do. Had very strong political acumen. When she was in opposition years ago during the NDP government, when Clark was around, etc., she was considered politically astute. I am just shocked that she would fall into this CBC trap. Okay? Like, this should have been thought out. And what are we going to say? We know they're going to try to do this. They're clearly liberal and left. Let's figure out what we should do. I am startled. It would have been a great race if she was in it, to have a woman and an outsider and an experienced politician involved.
Well, you're absolutely right that Christy Clark should have known that question was coming. And you know, what does it matter that she maybe voted once for the Conservatives? She was a BC Liberal premier. Half the BC Liberals, more than half of them, are actually Conservatives. She had to live in both worlds. She supported Jean Charest because she thought he'd be the best leader for a Conservative Party that she thought was going too far to the right. And that would be a fine explanation, but she doesn't want to do that. She says, well, I misspoke. That was her response initially when this all came down. I misspoke. That wasn't good enough, and she's pulled out of the race. Meantime, you wonder who fed that information to CBC. Was it in fact the Liberal Party? They, of course, just absolutely, they want Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada and governor of the Bank of England, as the next leader. Katie Telford, Trudeau's chief of staff, is making phone calls on his behalf. So are other senior members of Trudeau's inner circle. Jerry Butts is doing the same. They're saying, please, come on and support Mark Carney, because Mark Carney supports so many of the policies, in fact, came up with some of the policies that Justin Trudeau was made the champion of. And this is now being questioned by Canadians across the country. And so, John, how do you think Mark Carney first opens eyes and gets on television and gets Canadians to watch and see what a great guy he is? How do you think he does that?
Well, guess what? You'd think he might go on Canadian TV, but no siree. He's down in the States, parading himself in the talk shows. Has something to say about the media down there, doesn't it? And
he's on John Stewart Show. John Stewart Show. You know,
yeah,
which is
he's
kind of a left-leaning
himself
show as well, right?
Yeah, rebranding himself as this jovial guy, kind of fun guy. Hey, guess what? Kind of works.
We have to prepare for it. And I think, you look at what happened 5-6 years ago when we did have a similar situation with the trade war, and others did.
Lumber, and well, there was only a few things.
Lumber's very important to us, John. We can be friends. There can be a few benefits, John. Friends with benefits, but not benefits of trade, benefits of, defense.
Wish some of that political acumen would have been followed by Christy Clark. Come on. This is a rough and tough game. There are, people stabbing each other in the back behind the scenes all the time. We know that. Well, I think it's I think he's been, Mark Carney is the guy. This is the guy the Liberal Party wants. I don't know if anyone else is going to run against him, Robin.
Well, Krista Freeland's going to run. Krista Freeland, though, I believe, has been perceived as by the Trudeau circle as somebody who betrayed Trudeau, stabbed him, went out publicly and said he needed to resign, and embarrassed
Is she
Trudeau.
going to go on the John Stewart Show? I don't know.
Well, she's been on U.S. television before, but I don't know what Krista Freeland's going to do. It shouldn't be an anointment. It shouldn't be just one guy that they celebrate, but they don't have a lot of time. They've got to get somebody in place quickly because we're in a few days' time, we're going to have that very strange, overweight, orange-haired guy down in the U.S. taking over as the president. And that's ugly, John. That's ugly. We're just a matter of days away from Trump and his threats and bullying.
The funniest thing happened to you and I. We were at a business luncheon the other day, and somebody locally referred to our podcast as very Trump friendly. And frankly, I was startled. I'm pretty sure I've stated my opinion about this man. So let me reiterate, please. I've been in business somewhere around 45, 50 years. I know everyone's saying that's impossible. You look like you're 40. That's not the case. That's not the case. I've seen business people. I've had ups. I've had downs. I've been around the block. And right out of the gate, I would never in a million years do business with Donald Trump or any of his businesses. This is the kind of personality that he conveys. The man is not truthful. He's a bully. He'll use conniving methods to get ahead. And this is the man that is now leading the free world, and that we're almost putting our future in his hands and his judgment. Come on, let me state this clearly to anyone who's a bit confused. I do not like this man. I think that the West is in terrible danger. I think the U.S. is in maybe a precipice of civil war. This is not a good thing. I do not like Donald Trump. Let's make sure that is conveyed clearly and thoroughly to anyone listening.
Anybody who thinks you're pro-Trump and heard that can't stand by that. I don't think a civil war is coming, frankly, John. But I do think that
they're
Donald
already
Trump
in one.
is
I think
not
they're
good
already
news
in
for
one.
Canada with these threats of these tariffs. I was talking to a Canadian friend who actually lives in Palm Springs, and we were back and forth a little bit. And I said, we're very concerned about Donald Trump on this side of the border. He's very unpopular here. And she said, we had no choice. We need to get rid of all this wokeism down here. It's time to get rid of all this wokeism. And that is resonating on both sides of the border. That is one of the reasons Pierre Poilievre is starting to pick up steam. And that's legitimate. But the rest of it, I question. I think this tariff stuff is going to be terrible for Canada if he follows through. And I think trade wars in general are bad for the economies of so many countries. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But, at the same time that he's threatening tariffs and saying, I'm going to put big tariffs on all the things you import to the United States because we have a trade imbalance. We want your water. Now he wants our fresh water. Here's what he had to say about that.
Millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
Well, what's next? What's next? He's soon going to want our hockey teams.
He's going to want our children. Well, he actually kind of already does. He wants to make them part of the 51st state, Johnny.
Yeah. What else does he want? Clearly, whatever hits his head at any time. And let me just clarify the Civil War comment because I think it'll be misinterpreted. Listen. So Civil War back when it actually happened was with people with guns and kill each other. Now it's informational civil war. Now it's a very different looking thing in which people are attacking each other with disinformation and using third parties to convey that information, like Russia and the Middle East and China. This is an information civil war that's already underway. God, I hope it never gets to guns, but I am cautiously. I'm not sure if we'll ever cross that Rubicon.
Well, John, I still stand by my first statement that I don't think we're actually heading to civil war, but I do believe there's huge discord right around the world. And I think there's been a huge tilt to the left over the last 30, 40 years. The middle class has been shrinking. The working class has been shrinking. The difference between the very rich and the very poor keeps widening all the time. People are very frustrated. They feel that they're being talked down to by government, and they are not seeing a solution to this. They want to see jobs created. They want to see real work, not just jobs created by government and civil service work. They want to see industry grow and things like that. And people that are talking about doing that tend to be on the center right now. So we'll see how that all goes. But we're going to talk more about all this, John. We'll talk about the candidates. We'll talk about what's ahead in the crystal balls, because we've got somebody who's got a giant crystal ball, and she's given us such great information over the last couple of months. An old friend of mine. Maybe you'd like to introduce her.
Yeah, certainly I would. But I just want to reiterate, I really believe what you said. It was well stated. The middle wants help and opportunity and their future back. And whatever that looks like, we're gonna see, and we're gonna talk about it, aren't we? And Judi Tyabji, a guest of ours in the past, very popular guest, is now going to come on and talk about this Liberal race and talk about what we've just been talking about, Trudeau's exit strategy, some of the thoughts on how Canada will be dealing with Donald Trump. She's a former BC Liberal MLA standing in Okanagan to give us her take. Let's zoom her in.
And now with us once again, easily one of our favorite guests as we move towards the end of 2024. And she's agreed to come on and withstand more Rumble Room in 2025. Judi Tyabji, all the way from Peachland. So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Robin. I just can't resist beating you in a debate.
That's fabulous.
We'll see how it goes. I say to the author of a book about Christy Clark, who I think didn't cover herself in glory on that interview with CBC and quickly backed out of the leadership. What did you make of that whole thing? The idea of her running in the first place, the hurdles that she would have had to climb in order to be able to convince people in Quebec, for example, that she was legitimate, because her French is not bilingual, and just jumping into the race late like that. What did you think about the idea of it and the sad way that it kind of came to a halt?
Well, I actually think it was smart for her at the point where she knew how short the runway was, for her to really take a close look on whether or not she wanted to have her last foray into politics be something that wasn't a sure win, because there's no way it was a sure win. And there were many elements of what's going on federally that are similar to what happened to the BC Liberals before she ran, left. Basically, her brand at that time was popular radio host, and she came from kind of outside. And although she was, previously an insider, she'd been on the outside. She rebranded herself, and she took on Kevin Falcon and had that surprise win. And then, of course, didn't have the support of a lot of the sitting MLAs, and then came from the outside. And when she won the election. So I think probably a lot of it, she was thinking, I've done this once before. It feels a bit familiar. But there's major differences, because today she's someone who, regardless of what you think about her, she was the only woman in Canada to win 2 elections in a row, the only one in terms of leadership. And that's a lot to put on the line for an uncertain situation. Whereas going from a radio host to just challenging a leadership race can improve your brand. Then you win it, and then you go into the election, and people don't expect you to win, and then you win that, and then you have all 4 years of tumult, and then you win again, although she lost a majority by 1 seat. So I think she had a lot to lose, and I think the fact that it was so right out of the gate before she'd even made an announcement, hey, you used to be a conservative, and your French isn't very good. She's probably like, you know what? I'm going to tap out.
Judi, I have a natural evolution from this explanation of yours. A question for you.
Okay.
So you've been a Liberal in the past. You've also worn other political colors, as have I, as maybe Robin. I don't know. I mean, I've been all over the map. That is natural in this country. Are you a federal Liberal supporter today? If so, why? And if not, why not?
Well, it's funny because I'll just qualify that, because you're right. I have had many memberships provincially, but I've always been a federal Liberal. I mean, I did support Mel Hertig when he had the National Party and we were dealing with all those trade agreements. And I was very concerned about Canada's sovereignty and our water and our agriculture. So I did actually support that Council of Canadians, Mel Hurtig National Party. That was just one election. And I think that conversation needed to be had during that election because we had the amendments to NAFTA and our groundwater is still protected because of that one election. But I've always been a federal Liberal. I did vote for Joe Clark, but I didn't have a membership card. And you won't find that I misspoke on that.
That's fabulous. You know,
Yeah.
folks don't get the reality of how this works. If you are involved in politics, as all three of us are, and some obviously elected, some not, but in the background, and you wish to help a candidate or a party or a vision, you end up buying a membership in that party, and that is very normal. That is so normal. And then as the tides go, and as every single politician eventually rides out their mandate, you might change, and you might then help another group, and you end up buying their member. I mean, this is so normal. I can't believe she stumbled on this.
Well, and I actually think that it could have been played. I mean, maybe she legitimately didn't want to run because a short runway and her French wasn't fluent. That could have been it. And basically starting off with controversy, she's like, this is more than I need right now. But it could easily have been played that for those conservatives who are not comfortable with their current leader, here's an option for someone who even, supported Jean Charest for the same reason. So she could have potentially pulled people in because Christy Clark has remained very popular in the business community right across Canada. She's got strong support in some of the biggest players in the country, whether it's the corporations or the banks or whatever. So I think that could have been navigated. But you look at the candidates who are in the pool right now. I thought Dominique LeBlanc was going to run. I was surprised he didn't run. I loved his reason. And then there was the Mark Carney interview.
I want to get okay. We're gonna shift now. You're moving in towards my next question, and it's all
Okay.
about. We've talked about the outsider. We've talked about basically the idea of Christy Clark, which did not come to fruition. Now we get directly into the gunnels of really the anointed one, and the one that we thought would be anointed, and then she decided to turn on the prime minister and publicly castigated him and walked out on cabinet. That's of course Ms. Freeland. So Mark Carney seems to be the guy that Trudeau wants. He's got people like Katie Telford making phone calls. Gerald Butts is speaking for him and on his behalf. It's pretty clear he's the anointed one as far as the Trudeau camp goes. He brought in a lot of Trudeau's policies. Sounds like he would continue them. So, and he makes his big debut in a sense to Canadians on an American show. He goes on with John Stewart. I mean, it's classic Canada trying to build your profile by becoming popular in the United States. What do you make of Mark Carney? Have you dealt with him?
I have not dealt with him, but I obviously have followed him, and I was really blown away by that interview with John Stewart. And I think tactically, it was clever to go south to catch the attention up north. In one day, it's had over 1.6 million views because of the traction of that show. It also gave him the opportunity to show Americans that we can have an open conversation about our relationship. And he wasn't afraid of tackling all the tough things. And he came across, I thought, as a quintessential Canadian, approachable, kind of funny, understated, humble, and yet rock solid in terms of it's not on the table. It's never going to happen, John. We're not going to move in together. Really like you as a friend. It was well played. So I liked every part about that. Going back to Chrystia Freeland, it was my feeling, even at the time that she resigned, that Trudeau had decided that Carney was going to be his successor, and and as a courtesy, he went to her and said, I'm moving you from finance into another. She would have had a senior portfolio. She was going to remain as deputy prime minister. And effectively, one thing no one's talked about publicly is she breached her oath of confidentiality by using that meeting as an excuse to quit before she was shuffled. And she made it look like it was his fault. That bothered me a lot. And I know I don't like to say negative things about women in politics as a rule, because I mean, hey, misogyny is still pretty rampant in politics, but it doesn't matter what her gender is. It's offside to talk about a private conversation with the prime minister and use that as an excuse. And in my view, Canadians lost the chance to have Mark Carney as a senior cabinet minister because of her choice to do that. It became all about her. Dominic LeBlanc had to move in to that position, which he did, and he did beautifully. And then they had to wait until after Christmas for Carney to take a portfolio to give him some sort of platform to speak on. So it's unfortunate. I mean, it created so much instability. Having said that, I think with one interview, we're back where we could have been in December as a country, because for me, the line that I remember most from Carney's interview with John Stewart is that Dominique LeBlanc and Melanie Joly and the Labor Minister, they all chose country over party and over personal ambition. And that's statesmanship. That's
So let,
statesmanship.
It's
Judy,
lovely
let me
politics too. It's lovely politics.
is.
Anyway,
let me
John,
give
It
you
is.
both
It's
the
great.
story that even Robin doesn't know about this. It's my Mark Carney story.
Oh,
So
Oh,
back in '09, I was chamber chair, succeeding off of very extraordinary capable leadership of Robin Adair. And at that time, of course, we were facing what was ostensibly the worst economic, in my opinion, depression of our lifetime.
yeah, yeah.
And there were groups in which we were invited to speak at, etc. And somehow or another, Carney and his folks connect with me and ask me to comment. This is sort of after it had happened. So I think we're now in the spring of '09, and
Mhm.
asked me to give a sense of what's happening in the business community. He must have had 100 of us across the country, right? And so I would write to him about my thinking about what's happening out here. And in fact, he replied. And he would consistently reply. This happened for about 9 months. He was considered at that time a global leader
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
allowing Canada to come out of that depression so successfully. Then I
Mhm.
met him up here in the up in Nanaimo that year. He was speaking at an economic development conference, and at that time thinking about running. I think that might have been when Trudeau was considering running, and it obviously did.
Mhm.
And so I sort of got to know him in some small sense a little bit more than most. Okay.
Right.
And that person I knew then is nowhere near whom I saw on this interview. Okay. That person
Right.
then was somebody that I would certainly want to have run our economy, but as sort of a leader and a personality, I don't think so. And so
Mhm.
he's been pegged to be the Ignatiev and that
Yeah.
kind of person. Then he has this interview. So here I am thinking at this stage, like today, was that coached, or is that who he really is?
Mhm.
And because I watched it and I go, what? This actually
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Guy's got
I,
personality.
I totally agree. I was really kind of betting that Christy Clark, if she'd run for the leadership, had a really good shot at winning every single engagement with the other candidates, because she's a master campaigner. And if she had won the leadership of the Liberal Party, I would have been betting that she would have won the election, because I think she would have made mincemeat out of the Conservative leader. However, I didn't think Carney would have that cachet.
Right? Neither did I.
well, and
And it
and
was
and to
great.
John's point, and I
Yeah,
have met Mark Carney, and I actually heard him
yeah,
speak in Vancouver at a chamber event as well,
Yeah.
a BC
right.
chamber event, and sat at a table with him and talked to him at a dinner table.
Yeah.
He was
Mhm.
very dry,
Yeah,
very
you're right.
serious. We weren't
Yeah,
cracking a lot of jokes for that speech, and
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I didn't think he was bad. I just didn't think he was gripping by any stretch of the imagination, and that's been a criticism of Freeland as well. That she's super
Mhm.
smart. She speaks what, 6 languages. Her
Yeah.
CV is enormous, and she's had some very senior jobs. However, On a podium, she's not great. She's not a great public speaker. She's not great in
Right.
debate. And you wonder
Right.
how that goes in a communications age. And you're a
Yes.
communications
Yes.
person, Judy. I mean, that's really
I
how
am.
you and I got
Yeah.
to know each other, was doing
Mhm.
doing radio and television stuff. And
Yeah.
you got very much into that after your political life. You would
Yeah.
have to agree with me that it's so important. Now, so Carney could do it on John Stewart. Maybe Carney can do it on a larger stage. And I
Yeah.
guess the proof is in the pudding on that. How about Freeland? What do you think about Freeland? Is it all over for her just because now suddenly this week Carney's had a good show? Or could this be a tighter race for the leadership than people are forecasting?
So I actually think that Freeland's path um, was set by her choice to go public against her own leader at a time when the country needed to stay united. And what that means is anyone else who was rowing the boat, because I'll tell you, I know what it's like to be in a divided caucus. And if you're rowing really hard one way and someone starts rowing the other direction or throws their paddle in the water, you get mad at them because you go, look, I'm working really hard. We're going over here. And somebody breaks out. So I think that while she will almost certainly have some support from other dissidents, I've also seen that many people who lead the charge of being dissidents, like David Mitchell in the BC Liberals, they have to go do something else because uh, if they do it once, they're known to do it again. It's almost like a brand. She will. I believe that her most famous moment was what she did. That's the most famous she'll ever be. Which, in a way, as somebody who thinks she's an incredibly smart, very accomplished person who did a lot of good things for Canada, I think it's a shame because I think a lot of the things that she did will be overshadowed by that crack in the solidarity from the second in command. And my own feeling as well is that Trudeau, people say, oh, he must have a problem with women because so many women have gone against him. No, I think he has problem with judgment. I think that in his, and I can get away with this. You guys can't say this. Disclaimer, you can't say what I'm going to say.
Okay, good.
Affirmative action at that level is not a good idea. So doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I got to have half women. Who's a woman? And I'm not saying he did that with her. However, I do believe she was elevated to a position by him where he recognized her talents, not her experience and not her depth, and supported her in that, very similar to some of the other women who went after him. And that, to me, uh, makes him vulnerable by putting people that close to him who may not have the kind of generational exposure to the realities of the political culture like someone like a Dominique LeBlanc. And it's not about gender. It's just because previously it was only men. So it will be men who will be in that culture of understanding the impact. We will get there as women, but there needs to be some mentorship if there isn't precedent.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
I'm going to start to shift our focus south
Okay.
with a angle up here.
Okay.
It turns out, actually, Freeland was one of the few global leaders that was able to stand up to Trump during the renegotiation of NAFTA, and it would be very unfortunate that, in fact, her last brand would be what's happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Because I certainly would like to, nothing more than pissing Trump off than having a female confront him and bully him. Oh, lordy, lordy, that makes me feel great. Let's talk about this. Tariffs will for sure be launched right in the middle of all of this mess. Will Canadians rally and potentially lean towards supporting the current government and say, let's help this liberal government face this bully? Hey, I've stated very unequivocally, I hate this man. I think he's a threat to Western society. So no, I don't know where you stand on this, but that's where I do. Or will it, or if they, or will Poilievre rise out of the ashes here, the Trump ashes?
Well, he's hardly in the ashes. He's got about a 30% lead in the polls, John.
No, let me finish. Will he rise out of the Trump ashes and demonstrate that he, in fact, is the guy and warrants this large lead in the polls?
Well, that's a really, you've given me a giant platform to work from. I will say that the woman I really wanted to be taking on Trump was Christy Clark, because that would have been fun.
Oh yeah, well,
But he wouldn't have known what to do with her. But actually, no, I won't go there. But going to your comment, um, I believe there's two things that will be at the heart of the next election, and one will be Canadian sovereignty. It's going to be huge, but not for everybody, because the other thing that's going to be huge is the fact that Canadians cannot afford to live. A $2 apple is not a sustainable price. And it's not just about gas, even though gas prices could go up with carbon taxes. People are fed up, they're exhausted, they're scared. They look at their kids and they go, how will my children afford anything? When you get a farmer's carton of eggs and it's $8, or you can get the super safe ones that are the chickens are having a miserable life. That's not a good decision for families to have to make. And it's like a constant weight on a parent or a family, the seniors, whoever you are, wherever you are in the demographic right now, there's an anxiety. And whomever is going to win has to speak to that anxiety with compassion and solutions. And that brings me to the Conservative leader. Would we actually say that he's a man of compassion? Now, if he leans into his childhood and his humble beginnings and can speak to the fact that he's got a wife who's from a different demographic, his children are growing up in the world. If he can speak to Canadians without that sort of visceral anger, without sort of contempt, without you talked about ashes. I feel like he would burn the house down on our social programs to save a buck. That's certainly, and Carney speaks to that a little bit about, so that's one thing. But going to the Canadian unity, I don't think he has a chance to speak to that. I don't think anyone will believe him. I don't think it helps to have Kevin O'Leary running around saying, what a great idea, let's unify our economies. That is the loss of sovereignty, O'Leary. That's part of the heart of it.
Since when did we elect him to become our rep? Oh my God, that makes me ill.
But he's kind of a boogeyman in all this, don't you think? I mean, and Judy, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but I do think there's more to it than it's these things are never black and white. And the economy is a big problem right now, as you stated, and this move towards unbridled drive towards net zero, fuel consumption, and we're going to move towards a green economy as rapidly as we can. When oil and gas is one of the biggest profit makers for the Canadian economy, and the axe the tax, he's doing it because it works. People really respond to that, And the other thing, beside the economy, and I've heard this suggested on both sides of the border, what we're seeing in Western societies, it's a battle now between economic issues and cultural issues. And people are feeling they're being talked down to on cultural issues. We're being told to accept a lot of things that have rapidly changed. We were told by Trudeau that we now have a post-national non-culture in Canada, that we don't have a Canadian culture anymore. We're part of some sort of a world maelstrom. And it comes down to, we're supposed to really honor Vaisakhi for the Indian community and Chinese New Year's for all our friends that come from Asia and Southeast Asia. And we're supposed to downplay Christmas. We're supposed to call it a seasonal holiday, and we shouldn't have Christmas.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
But I mean, it is part of the debate. It's part of a feeling that we've gone too far down this road, along with some economic decisions that I think have been short-sighted about. Why aren't we selling energy to the Europeans when they badly need it? Why aren't we replacing Venezuela in terms of selling oil and gas to countries that need it around the world? Why are we pulling back from those things? I think those were also mistakes. And people like Mark Carney were very much in favor of that and were economic advisors to Trudeau leading up to this election.
I agree with you completely, Robin, that this move to, I don't even know if we could call it the left, but and I don't consider it progressive to jam political correctness down our throats when we can barely afford to fill up our cars. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You go to the hierarchy of needs. We need clean air. We need to have water. We need to have a place to live, right? food we can afford. These are our needs. And the reason that we collectively decided we wanted government was so government could manage our collective costs and organization of our needs. If we need to drive on a road, if we need to, make sure that the water doesn't have toxins in it, that's what government's supposed to protect us and take care of us. And I don't think people have felt that at all. I think people think that government has wandered off into lecturing us about why we're bad kids. And, it's like, but if our kids can't afford houses, if universities out of control, if people will start to give up, and we don't want that. We need hope. And when Trudeau ran the first time, he said, hope and hard work. That sounds Canadian. Don't tell me that there is no Canadian culture. That's ridiculous. Canada is a great idea that we all have to work together to protect. And I do think, going back to what will Trump's biggest contribution be to the conversation, it will unite us in knowing that we are a country like no other. Chrétien's comments the other day on his 91st birthday. Last time I checked, he had something like 130,000 shares. And I always check to see, like, how is that relative to the other shares on the page? Like, they had like 150. Occasionally he might have 500 shares. 130,000, boom, Chrétien got it. And Canadians were like, yes, that, what he said. Thanks, Grandpa Chrétien. You're on the money. Canada matters. We're different. We have some of the greatest natural resources in the world and some of the best rules for harvesting them. We have wealth that can help us pay for our social programs. And at the end of the day, I think Canadians feel it's been mismanaged because there have been really weird priorities. And if I can say this as a Liberal, I think part of the problem was Trudeau didn't have a strong enough mandate to govern without Jagmeet Singh kind of wagging the tail wagging the dog a bit.
Judi Tyabji is such a great guest. And John, years and years ago when I was doing a radio talk show, she and I would get on and joust every week. We called it Radio Rumble. And it was an influence on naming the show the Victoria Rumble Room.
Yes, I love it.
She did some TV at Czech TV, and she's been an author now, and she's written a number of books. Her most recent on Rich Coleman, which we featured late last year, and she's going on to other great things, but has promised to be a regular contributor to our program. So that's great. We just love Judi. And we also love that we've got a new website, John. Pretty exciting new stuff, a new venture for the Rumble Room, and a new sponsor behind all that. Maybe you'd like to explain that and also how people can link up with the show.
Absolutely. We've tried hard in 2025 and succeeded, trying to consolidate the brand under one place, and that being our new website, as you can see above us, www.victoriarumbleroom.com, and in there is sort of our latest shows. There's contact information about you and I. There's soon to be information about our regular speakers like Judi, as well as links to all of our other social media brands, in which we have many. Special thank you to West Shore Web Hosting and Kelly Darwin for helping us get that site up, for being a sponsor for the show and enabling us to get this brand and vision all put together. Thank you, West Shore Web Hosting and Kelly Darwin. For those of you that would like a little bit of help on how to be able to hear us and watch us, listen to us, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we are on YouTube, almost 450 videos of ours and interviews that we've done, Robin, you and I. We're also on TikTok, we're on Instagram, and we have an audio version of the show. So, how many times do I have to say this? What a week. 2025 already feels like a full year, doesn't it? And all the shenanigans haven't even started yet. Just a Liberal mess in Ottawa, my good buddy in the White House, many weeks, I can't even say it. I'm John Jurisic, and I can't wait.
That was wonderfully expressed, John.
Oh, I'm so articulate, aren't I?
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And, John, I think that 2025 is already a year that is going to have so many great chapters and so many great stories that we won't know what to do in the Rumble Room, but we will struggle through it as we rumble on.